Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Governance Made Easy webinar today, titled Is Your Constitution Fit for Purpose? Brought to you by the Breakthrough Office. Today, we are having a discussion with Anna Fitzgibbon from the Breakthrough Office, Stephen Bowman of Conscious Governance, and Gordon Shaw from Grounded Governance. My name's Sean McDonald, and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 odd minutes. And firstly, thank you for attending today. We appreciate the effort you've made to be here for our live event, particularly our guests, international guests. During the session today, if you have any questions for our panel, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or on your toolbar. We'll try to answer as many of these questions as we have time for. And finally, if you stay through to the end, which we hope you will do, and as is customary for our webinars, we have a special treat. By answering a really short 1-minute survey at the end of the webinar, you'll go into our draw to win our beautiful gift hamper worth over $400. Today's webinar is brought to you by the team at the Breakthrough Office, specialists in accounting, governance, human resources, and payroll solutions, all under one roof for not-for-profit organizations. For those not too familiar with BoardPro, however, we are a board software provider, sometimes referred to as a board portal, and we serve around about 25,000 users across 26 countries. We enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with, you guessed it, clever software, with less time and deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we are a board software provider, part of our wider mission in the organization here at BoardPro is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, especially those with resource constraints. Now, I am going to let our guests introduce themselves, starting with you, Anna.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everyone. I am Anna. I'm joining from the Breakthrough Office, where I am part of the governance and compliance team. Really looking forward to today's discussion, and I will hand over to Gordon.
Thank you, Anna. Kia ora. Hello to everyone out there. Gordon Shaw from Grounded Governance. Grounded Governance is all about making governance easy, expert, and enjoyable. We help a range of different organisations in the governance space, and I'm a practitioner as well. I sit on a number of commercial and not-for-profit / community organisation boards. So glad to be part of the team helping on the discussion today. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Gordon. Steve Bowman from Conscious Governance. I've been doing this a long time. One of the things that I really enjoy about working with boards and CEOs is you get to spend time with some of the smartest people on the planet. And so one of the things that I really enjoy doing is passing on some of the wisdom and knowledge from some of these directors so that everyone can actually be part of and take the benefit of the wisdom and the tips and the techniques. I knew what I meant to say. The tips and the techniques that people have found to actually help boards and senior executives be the best they can be. Looking forward to this. Sean.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, team. So for the next 40 odd minutes, just sit back and relax and add to the discussion by asking as many questions as you will like. A full recording of the webinar along with the slide deck and the templates, the downloadable templates, of which there are, I think, Stephen, 3 today.
3.
They'll be sent to you at the conclusion of today's session. So let me now hand over to Stephen to get us started on the webinar today.
Why, thank you, Sean. Constitutions. Who's excited about reading constitutions? Said no one ever. So what we need to do is to really change our point of view about our constitution. It's not just a document that you go to when things go wrong. What it actually is a legal contract between your organisation and society, and in particular, your members, even if your members are the board. You know, there are many organisations where they've only got 7 or 8 members and they happen to be the board as well. There's others that have got hundreds of thousands of members. So in the end, it's a legal contract between the organisation and the members. So in essence, we've got to get it right, because otherwise things can come back and bite us if we don't. It also gives you your tax status, so that if you're a deductible gift recipient, one of the reasons that you're that is because you'll have a clause in there that allows it. your public benevolent institution, whatever it might be in your country, in Suva or South Africa, whatever it might be that gives you your particular tax status will always be in your constitution. The other thing that's really interesting is that what makes a not-for-profit is not the fact that it doesn't make a profit. That's rubbish. What makes a not-for-profit is simply that upon winding up, any surpluses have to be distributed to a like organisation with a like set of purposes. So that's, again, something that will be in your constitution. Now, there's all sorts of ways that your constitution or your rules or your whatever it might be, there's different names for them depending on how your legal framework has been set up, but there's a whole stack of them. So it makes sense that you as a director or as you as a senior executive or a member of the organisation actually understand under which legislation or act of parliament or whatever it might be are we actually registered. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say there. Now, Anna, Gordon, purpose of constitutions, what's your thoughts? What have you come across?
Yes, definitely. I think that the purpose of the Constitution should also form part of your foundation for your organisation. I think it's really easy to see your Constitution as a legal document that sits either on a file server somewhere or in a cupboard. But really using your constitution to form the basis of the work that your organization is doing, but also the conversations that your board and strategic team are having around the purpose of the organization. Gordon?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I think a good way to kind of summarize it too is just to think about it from a perspective of it's the rules on how your organization is governed. So it kind of sets the scene. And here on this side of the Tasman, because I'm representing the Kiwis in the audience this morning and this afternoon, we've got a big change with the change to incorporated societies and new legislation, and that all organisations that need to re-register have to have a new founding document or a constitution. So very topical for New Zealand organisations that are thinking about re-registration under the new legislation.
Okay, next one, Sean. So now the first question always is, how do we read this thing? And often it's with a good glass of red or a really strong hot cup of coffee. But the thing with the Constitution is there's three things always to recognise that when you're reading a Constitution and you're looking to see whether it needs to be updated. The first thing is in the Constitution, it'll have things that say we have to do this. So very simply, you ask yourself, are we doing this? It says that we have to, whatever it might be, are we actually doing that? So I've seen many constitutions where it says that the treasurer has to do X, Y, and Z in the Constitution. They haven't had a treasurer for 13 years. So it's just looking at it from a common sense point of view. So if you've got your Constitution, read through it and pick out those points that says, this is what we have to do. All right, now, are we doing it? If we're not doing it, you've got two choices. The first one is either to do it or to change your constitution. So you can't not do something that your constitution says that you have to do because that will potentially get you into trouble. The second thing to read on your constitution is what are the things that it says that we can't do. One of my favourite examples of this was quite recently where in the constitution it said right towards the end of the constitution, you cannot invest in real estate. Now, for some reason, the founding fathers decided they didn't want this organisation investing in real estate for whatever reason, lost in the fog of time, the reason why. But nevertheless, it was in the Constitution. What happened was that the organisation had just gone out and bought its first head office. And one of the members who was a little bit upset with the organisation happened to be reading through the Constitution, looking to see, can they do this? And found this clause that says that you cannot invest in real estate. And so what they did is they brought an action against the organisation and they forced it to sell their headquarters. Now, the interesting thing is that they sold it at a loss. Who do you think potentially would be responsible for that loss? Probably the directors, because they went against their constitution. Now, it never got that nasty. However, it could get that nasty. So have a look at the things that it says that you can't do and either don't do them or change your constitution. The third thing is, when looking at changes in legislation, and Gordon's mentioned already what's happened over in New Zealand and certainly in Australia, and I guarantee every other country in the world, there have been changes in your guiding legislation that need to be reflected in your constitution. In many places, it's got things to do with, can we hold electronic meetings? Can we have an AGM remotely? What are the different things that we need to put in place? There have also been some other major ones to do with charitable status and a few other areas. So you need to check to see what has changed in the legal status of your regulation or legislation and make your constitution fit up to what those changes are. Now, one of the best tips that you will get today, I guarantee, is this next one, which is, when you're reading your constitution, put yourself in the shoes of an activist and have that point of view. When you're reading your constitution, you go, how can I mess with them? And you read the clauses in there to see what are the ones that are in there that you could actually mess with this organisation. For example, any one director can call a special meeting of the organisation. Oh, really? Okay, so I'm really upset with my board. I'm going to annoy them by calling a general meeting every 2 weeks because it says I can. Or it could be anything, any number of members can call a special general meeting. Now, that might have been fine when you only had 50 or 100 members, but now you've got 5,000 members and it says that any 3 members can call a special general meeting. You're in trouble, potentially. So you just need to have a little bit of common sense in there. So put yourself in the shoes of an activist or an active member or someone who's a little bit peeved with you to see how can they actually mess with us, and does this make sense? And the interesting thing is, just yesterday I was reading a constitution, and it said in there that any 2 members form a quorum for the annual general meeting. And I just asked them the question, do you want this? Are you happy with this? And they said, well, we've never actually had a problem with it. I said, yeah, but what are the things that could happen if members wanted to call a general meeting, they met that requirement, and just 2 of them turned up for it? Then you have to listen to what it is they have to say. Is that what you want? And the real purpose in reading a constitution is just to ask yourself, is this what is required for us to do what we need to do as an organisation and protect the rights and interests of members? Anna, what insights have you got on how to read a constitution?
Yes, definitely. I think what you shared on making sure that it reflects your current process is extremely important. I also quite often encourage our clients to use your constitution as a tool. So if you do have a member reach out with a query, or you're trying to go through the process of appointing a director, have your constitution up to double check your process is the correct process that is in the constitution. Have it as a tool to read through. It's always great when you first join a new company to read the constitution in full. I would recommend making yourself a very strong coffee before sitting down to do so. But it's great to have a read through so you have a bit of an overview of what is actually in your constitution. And then I encourage you to have that easily accessible. So every time you do have a question relating to the structure of the organization, relating to the governance process, it's very easy to open up your constitution and find that section, have a read through, and then use that as your response or your process that you're working through.
Gordon, just before I call to you, one of the other tips that you can use is to actually have a 1-page summary of your constitution of the key clauses that you need to read. So even if you don't read the whole constitution, in brackets, but you really should, you know what the 3 or 4 or 5 key clauses are. And typically they'll be around, term limits, or they'll be around, particularly around dispute resolution. If there's a dispute, you've got to follow it. Yeah. Anyway, so a 1-page summary. It could either be in your board charter or actually a 1-page that you attach to the constitution itself. Gordon, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I sort of concur with you, Steve, and Anna around using it as a tool, because there's many organisations where you might be in your 3rd term of 3 years and you haven't needed to look at your constitution for some time. But what you touched on, Anna, is having it as a tool and then referring to it, especially when there are things happening within the organisation. So, for example, a community group that I'm a chair of has its AGM tonight, and lo and behold, I reprinted the Constitution because we've got some voting, and I needed to make sure that I could quote the specific clauses that relate to appointments and such forth. So that tip is one that I recommend all of the attendees today sort of take back and say, when's the last time you had a look at your Constitution? Have you got a printed version or a one-pager like you mentioned, Steve? And then how do you use it in a good way to get better outcomes?
And then the other part that, Dwayne, thank you for putting that comment in there, but also when you change, and we'll get into how to change it in a minute, but when you do change your Constitution, you've got to go through your policies and procedures to make sure that they actually reflect what's in the Constitution. So it's that whole circular, let's make sure that what we're doing reflects what's in the Constitution, and what's in the Constitution reflects what it is that we're doing.
Definitely.
Okay, sure.
I have a question, Stephen.
Sure.
Not too sure who this is for, but I'll put it out to the panel. This is from Siobhan. My president called a special general meeting to ask members if they want the association to do something outside of the purposes listed, and with the quorum, members voted to do that, which has just happened against my advice. Apart from lots of grumpy members, rightly so, is there anything else I should be doing to de-escalate things?
Okay, so a couple of things there. First of all, it was to get members' views, not to get them vote and then telling the board what to do. So unless there was a motion put that we want to change the objects and this is what they should be, then that's advisory from the members to the board. That's the first element. The second element is that if you do want to change the Constitution, it has to go through a whole process. So it's not just a meeting of members. It needs to actually put there the pros and the cons and all those sorts of things. I'm not sure what de-escalating means, but so Siobhan said it was a motion to make a statement, not change the Constitution. Okay, so it's really not, the members can't tell you what to do. They can provide you with advice on what to do. The only thing that members have the rights for, and there's only 3 rights that members have, they're the ultimate rights. The first right is to change or not change the Constitution. The second right they have is to change or not change the auditors. And the third right that they've got is to ensure that the reports are noted. So the director's reports, the financial reports, and so on. But their 3 rights are sort of the fundamental rights. They've got the ultimate rights to change or not change the Constitution, and the ultimate rights to either appoint or unappoint an auditor. And that's pretty much it. So, Anna, wearing your hat now, everyone knows Anna's also a lawyer. So this is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, Stephen, please don't throw me under in front of everyone. I also wanted to add that I think that with any type of governance review or process, it should always be a conversation. I think that this is a theme that Stephen is going to be talking about further today, but particularly in the not-for-profit space, which I am in every day, a lot of the work that we do with members is relationship building, trust building. So it can be a bit hard when you're doing it retrospectively. However, I do encourage you to put in the hard work to be able to develop that relationship so that you can ensure members feel heard and listened to, but also can ensure that you're actually achieving the purpose of your organization, because at the end of the day, your members are likely to be the community you are serving. So their insights and feedback is essential for you to be able to be effective in achieving your purpose.
Gordon, wisdom?
Yeah, it's I sort of concur with Anna on that one. There's some specific things there that you need to be cognizant of. So I don't think I've got anything else I can add to that, Steve.
Sure. Okay, so let's move on, shall we?
We have a couple of other questions that have just come in. Are you okay with that, Steve?
Sure, go for
it. This is from Kathy. In New Zealand, we have to change our constitutions. Can members vote against this happening, even though it is law?
Maybe I can take that one.
That's Gordon's.
Gordon.
Yeah, I mean, interesting question, and the easy answer is no. To remain a incorporated society, you have to re-register. So that means that members have to agree a new constitution and agree that they will re-register as an incorporated society. So if they voted no, then essentially the society ceases to exist come April 2026. But it'd be good to kind of look at your current constitution. But essentially, the government has mandated that we all incorporated societies have to re-register if we want to retain that status.
This one from Celia. Thank you, Gordon. What if the Constitution comes from a legacy in a will and does not include provisions to change the terms in any way? Do we have to go to court to change anything?
Yeah, and I said Celia has said that she's New Zealand based, so I'll take the lead on that. I mean, I would say it probably needs. This is the case where I'm tipping my hat to Anna that you would want to have a little bit of legal advice just to make sure you're doing the right thing, especially around wills and testaments are a different legislation. So I would think it would be relatively easy and hope that you wouldn't need to go to court because it's about your constitution and in the re-registration process, if you're acknowledging the basis of what you were under the current legislation into the new legislation, that should be fine. But anything like that, then I would actually ask or get some legal advice in some kind.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Just to add on to that, apologies, Sean. I think that it's incredible having active board members and executive team that can do the groundwork for drafting up constitutional changes. However, when we do get into that complexities of multiple areas of law, I would always suggest going and getting advice so that you can have that final sign off for peace of mind and also to ensure that you have undertaken all of the responsibilities properly. And it is really a case by case basis, so we can't give the overall blanket advice, but I would suggest you do that initial drafting and then go and get that sign off.
Thanks, Anna. Stephen, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So we see thousands of constitutions during the year, and I read them all. And I can read them very quickly because the one thing I'm looking for in any constitution are the strange bits. The bits where you go, they want what? They've said what here? Do they really want this? And they stand out like the proverbial sore thumb. And it's these clauses in there that typically are historical clauses. Now, one of the things to recognise is there's usually the clauses where you go, what? They want what? Where did they come up with that? Is usually because someone at some stage wanted to control someone else. And that's where these strange things, these strange meddling clauses come in. So they've tried to manipulate or change for whatever reasons. And you go, the members can do what? Things like members can approve membership fees, for example. And then you go through, well, why did that come? Well, 30 years ago, someone was really upset at the 10% increase. So they wrote into their constitution that only members could approve changes in membership fees. Okay, so the members could actually, if they wanted to, approve no changes and force us to be insolvent, which means we have to close the organisation. Is that what you really want? So it's that sort of thing that actually is really interesting to look at. When you're looking at your clauses, have a look at the ones where you go, what did they mean by that? And usually it's to do in the annals of time, someone wanting to control something in a way, either to help fix a particular problem then and there, or someone had a pet barrow that they want to change. So that's why your clause, your constitution often has strange clauses. And what examples have you come across that you think where you went, what the?
Definitely have a few examples. I think quite commonly my examples, I would say, are where the constitution isn't fit for purpose. It isn't created with that organisation in mind. Instead, it might be a template that someone's pulled or someone has undertaken the project without actually knowing the organisation. So I would say that quite commonly the strange questions that are causing roadblocks are the result of people not knowing the organisation. And that's why I think it's always best to have a constitution review regularly to ensure that it is up to date with what the organisation is doing, but also to ensure that the people reviewing the constitution aren't just outsourced individuals that are coming on board for the project, but you're actually having that active involvement to make sure that it does reflect what your purpose is and what your intention behind these different processes are.
And the other thing that be aware, this just happened 2 weeks ago with a very major organisation here in Australia, where I was sitting down with the CEO and the CFO, and I said, "Why is that clause in there?" And they both looked at each other and said, "No idea, absolutely no idea what's," because no one had actually questioned why these things are in there. Gordon, any insights before we move on?
Yeah, and I think, Steve, on this side of the Tasman, the current legislation is quite old. So some of the templates that have been used are 20, 30 years old. So some of the languaging and some of the standard clauses, if you miss them, especially around sort of AGMs and quorums and voting rights, and the access now, of course, with digital technology to essentially move stuff to online and cope with online voting and all those things. Sometimes that can hick people up a little bit. But thinking about the future in New Zealand, probably the key one is they're mandating that you have to have a specific dispute resolution clauses in your new constitution. So there are some things that you have to pick up under the new legislation.
And just a word of warning to the New Zealanders and anyone else who don't have that in their constitution is most jurisdictions are moving towards having a standard dispute resolution clause. And if you've got it in your constitution, you have to follow it. Yeah, I still remember the one time I was the CEO of the Institute of Banking and Finance for 7 years, and I was in there not for 2 months, and I got sued by one of our members because we hadn't followed, in a dispute they had with the previous CEO, they hadn't followed step number 3 in the dispute resolution clause that was actually in the Constitution. And the member won. I then put him on a subcommittee because he was very smart, and it worked out well. But he won that, and it cost us a couple of $1,000. Wasn't a big deal, but it should never have happened. So just make sure if you've got dispute resolution, it's clear and you follow it, and it's reflected in any other dispute resolution documents that you've got. Right, let's move on. Now, how to change it with member approval. So only members can approve changes to the Constitution. It's one of their top 3 inalienable rights. Unless, of course, the member is a minister, and then it's legislation, you can't change it, only the minister can change it. So it depends. But one of the things is you are guaranteed to upset your members if you tell them, here are the changes that we, the board, want, just say yes. They won't do it. So you need to take them through a process. And we've given you some downloadable resources. One of them, for example, is from the AICD, the Australian Institute of Company Directors. When they were changing their constitution, they sent out a memorandum and some explanatory notes to members to explain why they were doing it. And I thought it was actually quite good. It's in the public domain. I just got it off their website. But it shows you the sort of process that you could go through to actually get the members on side. We'll go through this in a little bit of detail as we go through. Here's a checklist of things to do. We're doing this with 2 major organisations at the moment where they've tried a couple of things in the past, and the members have always said no because they didn't really understand. So we've done it differently this time to actually bring the members with us rather than imposing upon them. So, typically identify what is required and what are the reasons for the change. Then you get the board to approve that. Now, in many organisations, this is where they stumble because the board have people on the board that don't agree to some of the changes. And this is where you've got to draw the line in the sand and say, look, as directors, we're here to have a consensus, not 100% approval. So if you don't approve of this as an individual, yet the board have said, then you've got to get behind it, even though you may or may not like it. And you cannot go out and white ant and run your own campaign. So you've got to get the board to approve and discuss what these changes are before we even take them to the members. the reason that many organisations have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in developing constitutional changes that never got approved by their members, and I'm thinking places like the Institute, the CPAs and merging and doing all sorts of things with other organisations, the reason is that either the board were internally fractured or they didn't bring the members along with them and seek feedback. So you get feedback from the members about the proposed changes, then you develop frequently asked questions to get member feedback. You know, some organisations even go to the extent, and we're doing one of these at the moment, where they set up an independent governance or constitution working group made up of members and only one director and an external advisor. And the feedback comes back to them rather than going back to the branches or going back to the board, particularly if there's a little distrust there. So, set up a working group. That could be very useful. A member communications plan so that it then is looked at in terms of the social media. The Australian Dental Association did a fantastic job just recently moving from a federated model to a unitary model. And the president of that organisation was on YouTube and social media hugely, just providing the case for change and the feedback from members. They did a fantastic job from that, but it was managed and monitored by the member communications team, even if it's only one person. And then when you've done all of that, then you're ready to go out to the members for approval at a general meeting. So anyway, there's some really good insights into there. There's 3 phases that you might want to consider. And this addresses one of the questions that someone called Anonymous Attendee sent in, which was, do we do the non-controversial things first and then go on to the controversial things, or should we try and get it all done at the one time? If you have a constitution that is really out of date, and we have one at the moment, then what we've chosen to do with that group is to go through and take to the members all of the changes in the constitution that are procedural, i.e. we need to align it with current legislation, non-controversial, it just needs to align with current legislation, and then those things that are clarification. We're not changing any of the intent, we're just making it clearer because the clause was so sloppily written or that it's left questions in the minds of people. It's not fit for purpose. So what we're doing with that is that we're doing the case for change, we're showing them there's procedural or clarification, and then we're going out for the October members meeting to get members to approve it. And we're using all of the processes that we talked about in the previous slide to get them there. So it should be totally non-controversial. Next year, we're going to go for the jugular. Next year, we're going for those issues that are going to really have huge member interest in. So things like changes to membership criteria and changes to board composition, those sorts of things. And the members are very active. So the idea behind this is the procedural and the clarification ones we'll do this year. We'll get members used to the process. We'll try out our process, make sure we don't do any clangers there, but it should be non-controversial. And then next year, with our working group, we'll then take the stuff and really get member input into some of the things that go to the heart of being a member of that organisation. So, Anna, thoughts? What have you come across?
Yes, I actually did answer that question, and I suggested doing all of the constitution reviews at once. And the reason for that is I think quite often some of your changes need to be read in context of the whole constitution to be able to gather why you are making those changes. So I do suggest where possible, I understand that also is a huge administrative burden. So sometimes it might not be possible. And then I would really suggest to adopt that workflow that you did say, Stephen. But I think it is important to consider what is the intention behind the change that we are trying to make. And also to remember your board and your members are ultimately on the same team. We're all working together to fulfill the best outcomes for the organisation. And I know quite often it can seem a little strategic or competitive between the two groups to try and push a change through. But that is why we are constantly throughout this presentation reminding you to engage the members in the conversation, hear their feedback and thoughts from a member's perspective of what could be beneficial in that space. And that will also hopefully build that relationship to allow this process to be a lot smoother rather than getting on the defensive from the get-go and working out these changes from that state. I think it is really beneficial being able to work collaboratively, hearing different people's experience and thoughts, and also their insights from their point of view.
And I agree with that when it's 3 or 4 or 5 changes. Yeah. It's a different thing when you've actually got something like 60 or 80 changes because it just hasn't been done in so long. So look, it's horses for courses. The preference always is to get it done in the one thing. If you've got a good process in place, absolutely go for it. But also don't feel that you have to get it done in the one purpose, in the one go. So
and
Gordon,
I would say, sorry, Gordon, I would just add to that, don't rush the process. If you have a meeting coming up and you haven't gotten through all your changes, don't just change it for the sake of it. So I do also recommend that review your time frame before commencing the project to see how much time you actually have. If you can just push that one change through, that's essential, or if you actually have scope to be able to do a complete constitution review.
And the other thing is you don't have to do it at your annual general meeting. You can actually call a general meeting at any time that suits the purpose of the time frame that you got. So you don't have to be constrained for when your annual general meeting occurs. Gordon.
Yeah, and I think on this side, on the New Zealand side, with re-registration and a new legislation, there's a great opportunity to do this work and to plan it out. But the point I want to make to the New Zealanders on the call is that even though it sounds like it's a long way away, everything has to be done by April 2026. But there is quite a bit of work to be done. And so what I recommend is on the Incorporated Society's website, which is part of the Companies Office, there's some great downloadable resources around, for example, I'm looking at one now around your constitution checklist. But in the new pre-registration process, there's a constitution builder. And I know some of the questions I've seen online from participants was about how do we start the process, which goes first. And for example, one of the organisations I'm the chair of, we've taken our current constitution and over about an hour's time, just plugged it into the builder to see what it spat out at the other end. And it highlighted a number of gaps. So it became a good discussion point so that then we were able to go to members to say, we're starting this process. It's an opportunity to evolve and have something new and better. And we're going to work with you, those that are interested in a working group, to put that all together. So again, go and use those free government resources. They are very good.
Yep. Okay, next one, Sean. Okay, now, when do you toss your constitution into the rubbish bin? Because it's just so bad. And the answer to that is when it hasn't been reviewed for so long, or in the case of New Zealand, you've got to actually pretty much toss it away and use the new one coming up. So you use a template constitution. Just recently, this constitution that we're doing for this organisation had not been reviewed. Well, it had been added to in a really haphazard way. It was the most horrible thing to read. And there were elements of simple things like term limits in 4 different places in the constitution, and none of them were particularly put together well. So we tossed it all in and then just adopted the in Australia, the AC, these Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission template constitution, but we also showed them where the old constitution fitted into it. And that took someone about a day and a half to do, a lawyer about a day and a half to do, because they've done many of them. But if it's so bad that you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to fix up really badly crafted clauses that are everywhere, sometimes it's time to toss it in and just start with a template constitution. Okay, next one. Now, some modern trends in there just to be aware of, and we're not going to go into them in detail, but just to be aware. There's a growing trend towards smaller board sizes. So we know that in many organisations, particularly in Australia, the board sizes are between 14 and 16. Why? Because we should have 2 from every state and 1 from each of the territories, which equals 14. So this very, very small organisation has a board of 14 because everyone else seems to have it. Our big national body has one. Makes no sense. So there's this trend towards smaller board size. Board Pro have run webinars on that touch on this subject, but get yourself aware of what are the reasons, what are the both the commercial and the decision-making reasons for having a look at smaller board sizes. Term limits, there's a growing trend towards having limits of 3 years. There are some boards still that have 1-year term, so they have to go back and have another election for another year. It's just a waste of everyone's time and effort. So looking at term limits, looking at independent or co-opted directors to fill skills gaps, particularly in membership organisations or professional organisations where they feel they have to have just the people from that profession sit around their board. And the difficulty is that even though they'll all be different people, they'll still have the same sort of upbringing and view of the profession. However, if you get someone who actually has something, for example, generative AI, artificial intelligence, someone around the board who's got a lot of experience in that area, who also understands how organisations work, might be useful. So this is where your skills matrix comes into it. Board electing the chair, not the members. So in many organisations, still the members elect the chair, and that just means that it becomes a popularity contest and people put their names forward to be chair, whereas really you need the person best suited. I won't go through the others, but there's some other modern trends in there just to be aware of. Paying directors is another one. You've got to understand that there are some, about 1/3 of the not-for-profits in Australia pay their directors for all sorts of different reasons. But it's not something that you go into until you do a whole lot of research about what is relevant. Get advice on it when you need to. Okay, next one. The key clauses that create the most angst there are typically the size and structure of the board. Is it representation? Do we need people representing certain sectors or geographic regions? Staggering of term limits. And again, you can read through those at your leisure, but these are the ones that will give you the most angst. And you really need to do your due diligence and work out clear business cases why these may need to change. Don't just foist them upon the members. Give them the business case for change. Look at what the options might be. Get feedback from the members about what those options would be. Listen to them, and then come out with, through your working group, the changes that are preferred by the board that they'd like the members to consider. Anna, any thoughts on key clauses? What would you pick as your top 1 or 2?
I think that what you've shared on the screen there is very reflective of what I would think are key clauses. I would just add the only other one is our clauses around technology. I think it's very topical, particularly in a post-lockdown world, to ensure that while you are doing your constitution review, that you have adequately reflected what your workflows are in terms of technology for meetings, for resolutions as well.
Gordon, I could imagine in New Zealand that the answer is yes to all of those because they have to be looked at.
Yeah, they do. And there's some big sort of subtle changes with the new legislation around, one person from the organisation's contact details has to be held by the register. And then society officers' roles are clearly defined. So there are some sort of tweaks to the legislation, which in my view makes it actually easier to operate a society because it's clearly defined now. So again, good. Look at that link that I've put in the chat. Takes you straight to the Incorporated Societies page.
Or ask Gordon afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, now we've got some downloadable assets for you there. One of them is the AICD, what they send out to their members, just as an example of a good way of doing it. Another one is a template that I've used to help me go through and analyse constitutions. It's just a simple template, but it really works well. And then the last one is I've collected a whole lot of stories over time about here are some resources and some stories from the trenches about things to be aware of. Have fun reading those. I didn't want to take up the time of this webinar to go through them. Okay, Sean. Now, over to you, Sean and Anna.
Perfect. I might jump in here. It's been such a privilege to talk to you all today about your constitution. It's an area I am really passionate about. But our heart today around organising this webinar with Board Pro's incredible assistance has been to upskill you and your board so that you feel really confident in this space. And that is a passion that's also reflected through our launch of this new service offering to hopefully relieve a bit of that administrative pressure from you and also enable you to focus on your core business functions. I have included on the screen a little bit about this service offering, but feel free to reach out to me following this webinar if you have any questions. I also just want to say really interesting questions have come through in the chat. So thank you for allowing Gordon and myself to be typing away during that webinar. It's been great interacting with you all and getting to share some thoughts and ideas in the space.
Thanks, Anna. So just as we finish up, everybody, I'd highly suggest or recommend that you reach out to Anna, Gordon, and Stephen. I'm sure they'll appreciate your contact there. Now, you'll receive an email probably tomorrow morning now, which will include a copy of the video, the presentation slides, and the 3 downloadable resources that Stephen referred to. So just as you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our really short 1-minute survey to go in the draw for our gift hamper. We'll announce the winner tomorrow morning as well. So thank you again for your attendance, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the session today, which was brought to you by the Breakthrough Office. Thanks again, Anna, Stephen, and Gordon for your conversations today. We look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar, everybody. Have a great day.